You're playing a game of Hearthstone, you queue up against a warrior and everything is going great, and then all of a sudden, insert Mr. Smite's voice line, you just die. And you didn't die because they had Mr. Smite in their deck, you died because they randomly generated it either through the Juggernaut or Nelly. Now, I'm no game designer, but I feel like when you put a card in a game that has a win condition in itself in a deck that can randomly generate it, there is somewhat of an issue in Hearthstone. Today, we're going to talk about Quest Warrior, and I know this quest has been around since United and Stormwind, and it got marginally better with the Deadmines mini set released, but we have never seen this deck be as powerful as it is today during Hearthstone's newest expansion, Voyage into the Sunken City. At the time I am recording this video, Quest Warrior is always a tier 1 deck at every single point in the ladder. Blizzard did mention to me that if you end up subscribing to this YouTube channel, they will actually nerf Pirate Warrior. Quest Warrior feels extremely powerful across ladder, but I wanted to dig a little deeper and see what is actually happening with this deck because it feels like it should not be this strong. All you're doing is just playing pirates. I dug a little deeper and I looked at older metagames where this questline was first released in United and Stormwind, and it turned out no matter what rank bracket you were in, Quest Warrior just was not that good. And this continued to be the case. It turned out Quest Warrior just was not that good of a deck. On September 20th, 2021, Blizzard decided to do a bunch of standard changes. There was a ton of nerfs for archetypes that were absolutely dominating the metagame, including the Demon Seed. Blizzard also wanted to do a bunch of buffs to archetypes that they wanted to push further into the metagame. This included Beast Hunter, Hero Power Mage, but more importantly, Pirate Warrior. Stormwind Freebooter, Stonewall Anchorman, and Bloodsail Deckhand all received a buff to help push Pirate Warrior into a better spot in the metagame. With a huge shift in the metagame and the buffs provided for Pirate Warrior, Aggro Quest Warrior actually became a pretty decent deck in the format. This was also a symptom of a bunch of new stuff being tried out, but it ended up actually helping the archetype quite a bit. And Pirate Warrior continued to be a meta relevant deck all the way up until the United and Stormwind mini set Deadmines, where it ended up being a tier 2 deck for the majority of the time after the buffs. With the Deadmines mini set being released, Pirate Warrior received 2 cards that helped the archetype out tremendously. One of them being Defias Cannoneer, which was a really good 3-drop just to put into the deck, but the most important addition to the deck was Mr. Smite. The ability to give all your pirates charge in a pirate deck seemed pretty good. Now, the main reason why Mr. Smite was really good in Pirate Warrior is that Pirate Warrior did not really have a way to close a game out if they lost board control. Sure, they get infinite value off Rarran and the Juggernaut, but sometimes that's just not enough to actually win a game. You need some over-the-top damage from hand. Insert Mr. Smite, all of those problems seem to disappear because you now give your pirates a way to hit face. With the addition of Mr. Smite and Defias Cannoneer, Quest Warrior started to become a very popular deck that could take wins off your opponent out of nowhere, and most importantly, started to become a pretty meta deck. Now, the way that Vicious Syndicate described Quest Warrior after the Deadmines mini set really speaks to what those 2 cards did for the archetype. The explosion of Quest Warrior following the release of several powerful warrior cards was expected. The archetype's aggro variant has almost completely taken over, driven by the introduction of Defias Cannoneer and Mr. Smite. This is the most popular deck in the format at every rank bracket. The last report that Vicious Syndicate did for United and Stormwind before the release of Alterac Valley, Quest Warrior was still the most popular deck in the format at every rank bracket. And with a more refined list after the release of the Deadmines mini set, Quest Warrior finally ended up as a tier 1 deck in Legend. This was a very big deal. Fast forward to Hearthstone's newest expansion, and we see Quest Pirate Warrior being a dominant force in the metagame. So what exactly changed from Alterac Valley to Sunken City? There was a lot of really good pirates introduced into Sunken City. We see cards like Pufferfish and Obsidian Smith being 2 very powerful pirates that fit very nicely into this archetype. But the biggest deal was adding the Colossal for Warrior. Nelly, the Great Thresher, was the best card that this archetype could have ever dreamed of. Nellie's battle cry to discover 3 random pirates that cost 1 mana that go into her ship is very good, and the chance of you discovering Mr. Smite from this is pretty likely. There's only so many pirates in standard right now, which means your chance of getting Mr. Smite is a lot more common than you probably think. And I think a very underrated aspect of Nellie is that her ship has taunt, which means your opponent does not really have the option to ignore it. They kind of need to kill the ship in order for them to deal damage if they're not a spell-based deck, which enables the pirate warrior to get 1-cost pirates pretty consistently. And if any of those are Mr. Smite, well, you know, yeah, what is there to say? You're probably dead majority of the time. And even if you don't get Mr. Smite discovered from Nellie, as long as you have Mr. Smite in your deck, those 3 1-cost pirates can add up to a ton of damage. And at the same time, you already probably played Rarran, which means the Juggernaut's in play, which means you're randomly generating another pirate every single turn with a weapon, which means the damage from hand with this deck is just, well, kind of ridiculous. Now, I didn't want to make any false claims with this deck, so what I did was I looked at HS Replay and I looked at the 2 highest drawn win rate cards, and as you could probably imagine, Mr. Smite and Nellie are the 2 highest cards in that category, which means if you draw Mr. Smite and Nellie, you have a 62% chance to win the game. A 62% chance to win the game when any of those cards are drawn is absolutely disgusting. Now, the reason why I bring up this topic is because I think the way this deck wins games feels a little bit ridiculous, and quite often when I finish playing against a quest warrior, I don't really want to play the game anymore. The ability to randomly generate or discover a win condition like Mr. Smite has to be one of the worst feelings in the game, because I can't really play around you randomly generating it from the Juggernauts. I can't really play around you getting a 1-cost Mr. Smite. Those kind of win conditions just feel awful as a player. Now, I wouldn't necessarily think this is that bad if it was a slower combo oriented deck, but on top of them having insane burst later in the game, this deck is so consistent. You're playing a pirate every single turn. Every one of these pirates have a pretty strong effect. And overall, this is the type of deck that just feels horrible to play against. Now, what do I think needs to be done? I don't think you need to gut Pirate Warrior from the metagame. I think the deck is actually a pretty fair deck outside of randomly generating Mr. Smite, or even maybe discovering Mr. Smite from Nellie, which is exactly what I think should be done. We see a huge power increase with the release of Sunken City for Quest Warrior because of Nellie. Sure, the addition of really good pirates is great, but it's not nearly as impactful as getting 3 1-cost pirates. And the ability to discover a win condition that can cost 1 mana in a deck that you build around pirates feels like it should not exist in the game. And I think one of the biggest changes for the deck would just be the ability not to discover a legendary pirate. Almost the same way that you can't randomly discover a quest from a card that discovers a spell, make it so you can't discover a legendary pirate. That way, getting a lethal win is a lot less consistent. Now, sure, they're still going to be able to kill you with Mr. Smite in their deck, but at least they didn't just randomly discover a Mr. Smite and that's how you lost the game. It just feels a lot more fair to play against. Anyways, that's my rant on Pirate Warrior. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.